Blue Eagle kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atenista sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Tulong at tulong ni Pagka Blue Eagle, galing giting at tigil, blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan.
Let us understand mental health and explore how we can take care of our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Welcome to your weekly slice of mental health tips and tidbits with Pat and B, here on Mind Ed.
Sa'yo sumisilong kapag ang puso ko'y pagod.
Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. This is your stop for all things pop. Catch our all-around pop culture geek, Cholo Heydarian, as he throws in some dose of what's poppin' and what's hot in the pop culture scene here on Popcorn. Munch in with us every Thursdays from 4 to 6, only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Nasistress ka na ba? Nagpapanik o natatakot dahil sa COVID-19? Normal lang ang ganitong mga reaksyon sa ngayon. Pero may magagawa ka para mapagtagumpayan ang sitwasyon na ito. Ituloy lang ang pangangamusta sa mga kamag-anak at kaibigan gamit ang text, tawag o video. Tiyakin na ang mga bata ay ligtas at nasa maayos na kalagayan. Gawin sa bahay ang mga nakasanayan upang hindi mabagot o mabalisa sa panahong ito. Sa wastong pag-iingat, ang virus hindi kakalat. COVID-19, kayang-kaya nating tapusin.
Radyo Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.
Radyo, 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 katipunan.
Are you feeling sore? We can make that better. Tune in to the Ateneo Senior High School's first radio program, Soar, the Seniors On Air Radio, where you can listen to music you want straight from our playlists. Don't change that channel yet, because Soar is ready to put the you in youth. Soar, Seniors On Air, here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. The Jesuit Hour.
Wait, what? No! Let's try that again. Join the fun bunch of the Hugot Hour with Father J-Boy as we talk about anything and everything under the sun. Share your everyday Hugot moments and everyday Hugot quotes. G, tara na! Usap tayo! Bring your own baon, bring your own Hugot. The Hugot Hour with Father J-Boy and friends gathers every Monday at 6:30 to 8 in the evening. Only here on Radio Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Radyo Katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo Katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo Katipunan, the voice of the Blue Eagle.
OFW kami, di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela.
Mga Katipuneros, it's time to level up! Your talk variety program showcasing the best in media and other fields. As we feature the most loved personalities and the best practices of what we truly refer to as Magis. Together with multi-awarded multimedia guru Mr. Noel Ferrer, let's all level up every Fridays from 3 to 6 p.m. here on radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM.
Level up! Paulit-ulit ang nagplano.
Okay, all good already, all the best. Good afternoon, everyone. And when I say we have them all here, the best of the best, I'd say they're the best young educators who I can say are accomplished writers, authors, analysts, and opinion shapers. At maayos naman silang tignan, kaya pwede naman sila mag-TV at media savvy naman sila. So, at yung isa may hacienda sa Baguio, yung isa naman nakatira abroad. So, let's call them in. Now, first, sino kaya? Yung may hacienda muna sa Baguio, no? So, the whole COVID situation, certain ayos locked in a compound. Well, actually, kapitbahay ko dapat yan, but I don't live there. Kasama niyang kanyang pusa. Tapos nun, ayan na, nasa hacienda nila sa Baguio. And this is safely tucked there because they have a very good mayor na kayang i-contain yung COVID situation. Well, we have here, Sir Professor Richard Heydarian. Hello, Rich.
Salamat, Noel. Hello from solid, liquid, fluid north, whatever you want to call it. But I'm here in my hometown. I feel safe here, to be honest. Kasi nga, sabi mo, yung mayor namin was the former contact tracing czar. No, I'm not gonna mention him that much because my elections again, so I don't want to come off now. But I'm endorsing him. But I feel safer here for now. Yeah.
Now, how do you feel? Now, most of your co-anchors or anchors in GMA are really hit by COVID.
Yes, I mean kanina nakita ko sila kasamang Igan, no? They posted na they got it, and then sila Connie, I think they're on isolation. So medyo worrying situation. Actually, we were hoping sa GMA na we get back slowly back to studio, no? As the election starts at yun yung trabaho. So medyo napagod na kami sa Zoom lahat. So we wanted to go back. So now medyo worried ako. But I have to go back also to Manila soon because I have to fly out of the country. Go to Europe and abroad for some talks early next month. But and everything is in the air right now, so I don't know. Siguro si Lelo yung tanungin ko mamaya, yung next guest mo, how's the travel situation?
Ibang level yon, di ba? But the second one, I miss kasi every year umuwi yan. Pero ngayon umuwi siya, I don't know, nakapagpalawan at least. Pero hardly nakapag-ikot, I guess. But this is a time to go around the city kasi halos walang tao. So, here's Professor Leloy Claudio. I miss this person, pero yun na nga parang...
I miss you too. I miss both of you.
At the time it comes out, this interview comes out, nakaalis na. Kung makakaalis, pero sana makaalis.
God willing. Yeah.
Ito pa naman dapat yung makikita tayo in person, no?
Oo nga, dapat today. So,
dapat today, yeah.
But Leloy, how was your break?
Okay naman. So, nakarating ako dito mid-December. So, may mga couple of weeks where I got to see family and friends. And then, I'd set appointments for early January after New Year's with you, other family and friends. Tapos, yung mga, unfortunately, yung second half ng appointments ko, wala na. kasi nga nag-lockdown na. And I can't test positive, of course, because I'm flying back to the US. And if I'm not able to fly back to the US, di mahirap na kasi face-to-face yung classes namin.
Let's go there. No? So, did you observe na medyo nag-lax yung mga Pinoy during the Christmas season when you were here? Or in the States, kung yun yung batayan mo, ganun din naman yung mga tao?
Wala naman akong basis of comparison dun sa behavior dito. Pero I feel like compared to the US, mas praning pa rin yung mga tao dito. Kasi sa US, more or less. At saka grabe, may mga policies na kunwari, yung parang draconian for the sake of being draconian. Kunwari kung mag-test positive ka, pupunta yung barangay sa'yo, sisindakin ka. I mean, really, what's the point of that? Can't you just receive a note? So, sasabihin nila, well, if you just receive a note, baka hindi sumunod. Well, if you get a visit from the barangay, pwede ka rin namang hindi sumunod unless, of course, nakabantay yung barangay tanod sa harap ng bahay mo, di ba? So why are you exposing these barangay officials to people in their homes who are quarantining? Baka sila pa yung mahawa, baka sila pa yung magkalat. Only to create this perception na siga kami, we send the barangay directly to the homes of people.
That's true. Yung parang the imposition of power. Pero tsaka sa inyo kasi nag-work talaga yung contact tracing. Di ba yung may app talaga na gano'n?
I need to say, of course, na the United States is a very big place. So you can't talk about, it's hard to talk about the United States as one country with one COVID response. I come from one of the most liberal and progressive cities in perhaps the most liberal and progressive city in the United States, Berkeley. So walang anti-vaxxer doon, walang anti-masker, halos walang Republican doon. We have 92% vaccination. Most of my students are required to get vaccinated in order for them to go to class and required to get regular testing. So wala kaming outbreaks sa university. So it's a very small pocket, oasis of scientific rigor that allows me to feel safe where I live in the US.
So it's back to normal sa inyo, no? But Rich, how are you there in Baguio? Like,
actually, last year I was abroad, no?
Yes.
I was among few idiots who was still traveling around the world during the pandemic. So I was in States at some point. I was in India. I was in Vietnam. Then I was in the Middle East. At I can confidently say yung Filipinas yung pinaka-securitized response, no?
Running, no? Richard, running talaga, no?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a government that always holds a hammer and every problem is a nail. Mukhang ganun. Okay. And, the results show it's not working the way it should, no? Kung titignan natin yung economic activity, Filipinas has been doing worse than all these other countries have been mentioned. Even India did slightly better than the Philippines. So, obviously, this is choking off our economy. No? At some point last year, medyo up to 70% of economic activity was shut down. At the same time, pagdating naman dito sa infection rates, I think the problem really is contact tracing at saka yung also problems with yung limitations nung ating hospitalization capacity. So I would say na least pasaway ang mga Pilipino based on what I've seen, because I've been abroad and people take out their mask easily in cafe shops. Ako yung Pinoy talaga eh. So, I would always put double mask. It's sometimes N95. I used to have face shield and everyone would look at me like, what's wrong with this guy? He came from space. So, pasaway index kung yan ang gagamitin natin. I think the New York Times did a survey last year in terms of levels of putting mask and yung basic hygiene. Filipinos are among the highest in the world, if not the highest. I've seen people walking empty streets at night, naka-mask pa rin sila. Diba? Or driving alone with mask. I don't think you see that much in other countries. So, pasaway ay hindi yung mga taong bayan. Relatively. Of course, everything is relative, right?
Yung insight dito, Richard, laging sasabihin ng mga ibang politiko na ang problema natin, lack of discipline. Disiplina ang kulang ng Pilipino. Actually, hindi disiplina ang kulang ng Pilipino. Ang kulang ng Pilipino is actual good, intelligent, measured policy. Yun yung kulang natin.
Walang disiplina yung politiko.
Yung taong bayan, hindi.
The policy makers. Kasi mismong yung mayor mo, Richard, talagang he was so frustrated. Sabi niya kasi yung mga tao hindi siniseryoso yung contact tracing. Why? Because wala raw, hindi naka-media. Kasi di ba yung contact tracing talagang efficient yan eh. Nandyan yung mga politiko pag ayuda at saka vaccination daw kasi kitang-kita, visible yung mga tao. So, ngayon parang ang mga tao pag visible sila nandyan, pero yung policy na lang nga yung let's take it up, yung testing at this point very basic, di ba? After 2 years after, problema pa rin yung testing. As in,
mahal. Noel, PCR test is so expensive in the Philippines. It's just crazy expensive.
Ano ba ngayon? Mura na 1518 ngayon na PCR, no? Tapos ano yun? 48 hours pa yun.
3,000 pa rin at 5. Yes. Sa inyo ba magkano tuloy? Or Can you get it? Can you access it
Sa
anywhere?
US, libre na yung PCR.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lahat. Libre sa lahat. Kasi sa atin daw, Rich, sinasabi ng mga nasa gobyerno, libre naman daw basta may symptoms. Yun yung
So you have to wait.
Oo eh. Pag wala kang symptoms at kukunin mo lang daw for anything, for any business or something.
Right.
Pero yun yung dapat kang magbayad. Yun. But sa inyo, Leloy, it's easily accessible?
Sa punta kang drugstore, pa-PCR ka doon. Tapos, yun na yun.
Oh my God. So how do you think, Rich, should we like attend to kunyari, the testing at this point? Na ngayon, overwhelmed daw kaya pati si Ping Lacson 36 hours bago makuha yung result. So how should we address that? Very basic. 2 years after, hindi pa rin na efficient yung system.
Yeah, I think by this time, medyo dapat naayos na natin yung basics, no? Yung policy framework ay na dyan na. Parang I would have understood it if it's middle of 2020, but it's already 2022. So in terms of excuses of the government, minsan medyo hindi ko nagigets yan. Nag-improve naman yung scoring ng Pilipinas sa resilience index among others dun sa Nikkei Asia. But for much of the year and last year, talagang bottom of the talagang nasa bottom of the bottom yung Pilipinas. So I think that's a reflection of really inefficacy of our policymakers among others in relative terms. Again, yung vaccination doon nag-improve, no? I could say, especially dito sa
pero ngayon, they're scrambling for it. Kunyari may mga tao sinasabi, or round up those people na hindi pa vaccinated, meaning hindi pa rin ganun ka-successful yung vaccination program.
Yeah, and then hammer approach again. So nasa headlines na naman si Duterte na yung mga unvaccinated, wag kayo lumabas or pwedeng, kung this is fourth world policy rhetoric.
How is it there? How is it there in terms of vaccination? As in, kailangan pilitin yung mga tao. Kailangan pilitin yung mga tao abroad or
dito ba sa QC or abroad?
No, nasa abroad.
Yeah, well, sa US marami pa namang anti-vaxxer sa US. Pero yun nga, because the US is such a diverse country, it's depende kung nasaan ka. So, a place like where I live in, which is a university town and highly urbanized, our vaccination rate is above 92%. So, in the middle of the country, may mga 50% pa dyan, Right. So it's all politics in the US is local, walang isang katangian ang Amerikano.
That's true. Okay, after vaccination boosters, so pinag-usapan ganun pa rin naman, di ba? Parang yung mga tao naghahabol ng numbers ng mga tao magpapabooster. But next is, are we ready for the next variant, Rich? So tingin, parang kaya pa ba ng sistema natin? Or parang yun, pag nag-lockdown, if ever, or naging mas stricto, sinasabi na lang palagi, wala ng pera.
Well, first of all, let's not forget we're heading into an elections period, no? So actually, my worry is baka magamit ito or for some reason this will disrupt the democratic
non-election. Kayo magko-cover niyan or parang it's
I'm a bit worried about that.
Tayo mag-election. Talaga?
Or Noel. Yeah, yung mga Noel discussions. We see some of the candidates even saying that, no? And then may Odette pa tayo, and God forbid, who knows what kind of natural disasters would come again. So, worry ko na it could be used or exploited for disrupting the democratic process in ways that will benefit one side or the other. So, yun ang medyo concern ko dito. No? But if you look at it from the scientific perspective, Noel, I think there are indications or green shoots that we may be moving towards an endemic, in a sense that, yes, high levels of transmission, but low levels of hospitalization among others. Hopefully also as the boosters comes in. But sabi nga ng WHO, when you say mild, doesn't mean na talagang mild. It's just relatively more mild than Delta yung maging symptoms niya.
Kasi may mga deaths pa rin.
Yes, of course, if you're immunocompromised and some of the demographics are, regardless of the variant, they are really going to be vulnerable forever na yan. I think in the UK, for instance, there are millions of people who are classified as highly immunocompromised or highly vulnerable, no? For them, wala nang endemic. This will be a pandemic forever in one way or another. So unfortunately, we have people like that. So that's why we have to be considerate to other people. So baka milder for average persons, but it could still be very dangerous for some of the our countrymen. No, kaya nga agree ako with Leloy na hindi tayo mag-scaremongering. At the same time, I think it's also important hindi tayo magiging masyadong complacent. I've seen some stuff during past 2-3 weeks, etc. Like wala talaga, nagwala na yung mga nag-YOLO mode yung iba. Not in our place, but outside, no? And I was shocked, and I was asking the police or like, parang, what's going on here? Not to securitize
daw
it.
siya sa Palawan ninyo. Nagpalawan sila.
Ewan ko kayo, nag-YOLO yata.
I went to nag-beach holiday kami, pero the hotel was in a bubble. Felt quite safe there. And I think yung strategy is always, of course, to base it on the number of cases. I think yun nga, ang dami naman Pilipino na kusa na lang, they stayed home when they found out na tumataas yung kaso, di ba? So hindi nga, it's not as if Filipinos are super irresponsible. But I think the problem is yun nga, yung confusion about what to do. And I don't think we can blame anyone for being confused. There's an article in the New York Times today saying that the reason why Omicron is confusing kasi dalawang variable yung nagbago.
Yeah.
So it's more transmissible. So that changes how you create policy. But it's also milder. And so that also changes how you create policy. So there are these two poles that indicate quite different things. And you have to negotiate with both simultaneously. Kaya mahirap pag-usapan.
Tama yun. Dapat nuance talaga yung paggawa ng policy. Hindi yung parang minsanan lang sa lahat. But
Noel, I mean, sorry, just to cut it. People are tired, aren't they? I mean, how many hours does it take to come home? Alcohol, everything. I mean, kami medyo OC kaming mga tao. There are medical people background in my family. Honestly, 2 years of this, I mean, for me talaga, exhausting na ito eh. So I understand if some people have just like let go of everything.
Yeah.
So
Yun nga, parang Richard, so ako nga, I mean, like, isang buwan lang ako dito sa Pilipinas, napagod na ako.
Na-stress ka, I know.
Pagod na ako 1 month dito sa Pilipinas. I mean, masaya ako kasi I saw a lot of people I missed sa first part of my trip. But 1 month, pagod na ako. I can just imagine for people na parang day in, day out, you know, I have to check my privilege, I guess, you know.
Yeah. But the thing here is, yung mga tao hindi nagko-complain. Hindi man ganun, parang wala na sila doon sa space na mag-iisip pa na okay, magagalit ako. Kasi ang concern ng mga
manhid
tao.
Na ba?
Yun eh, parang oo, di ba? Sabi nga ni Richard, 2 years na ganito, it seems alam natin na may mali, parang pero we're coping yun sa day-to-day affairs natin. Pero it seems like kung may mas malaki pang usapan, parang they're keeping to themselves all these things. Rich, sa tingin mo, like ako naawa talaga ako kunyari, walang trabaho na naman yung mga nagmamaneho ng mga public vehicles, di ba? Sila yung bawal lumabas yung mga tao, so less and less people are coming out. Yung mga trabahador na kailangan talagang pumasok kahit papaano para lang kumita yung arawan. Yun yung parang, okay, sige, kahit ma-COVID na ako, okay lang. Kasi pagpunta mo ng mga jeep, nakita mo nun, talagang wala ng social distancing, pero kailangan nilang mabuhay.
Right. I mean, the story of the past few years, hindi lang pandemic, no, is where's the outrage? No, on so many level. With the AJ case, where's the outrage? Pinag-usapan namin ni Lelo yan. I mean, I think in any other country, tens of thousands were reportedly killed or EJK. There would have been millions probably on the streets. Even in Latin American countries, even in other developing countries, we didn't see that. Now, with all of this incompetence and yun nga yung very agencies that are at the forefront of dealing with the pandemic, DOH, you know, all of them, my scandals, my corruption issue, not once, not twice. And again, my question is, where is the outrage? Where is the organized outrage? And just to say it, I don't see that reflected in the survey so far. No.
Whether I go to you also,
of the president, whether yung standing of certain administration candidates or pro-administration, I'm not seeing it as reflected as much. And again, this is where cultural arguments come in, and I'm not very comfortable with cultural arguments. But all I can say is, where's the outrage? Yeah.
Ibabalik ko sa'yo, yung outrage nasa iyo. But instead of kasi yung after saying the truth or how you feel, how you assess the situation, biglang ang outrage nandun sa mga nagsasabi ng opinion nila. How do you feel about it? Was it the reason why you had to go abroad? Sorry, had to ask that.
Lelo,
ako ba o si Rich?
Right?
Pareho.
Sige, Lelo, go ahead.
The reason why I had to go abroad, you know, like the reason why I went abroad is the same reason why other OFWs go abroad. I mean, it's may magandang opportunity. Umalis naman ako during the pandemic. Before the pandemic rather, so I didn't know that this was gonna. It wasn't as if I was quitting on the pandemic response. Pero yeah, I mean, I can imagine that there are a lot of people these days na nawawalan ng trabaho dito who would like to accelerate the process of moving abroad, lalo na kung may mga ongoing petition na o meron na silang mga kamag-anak sa ibang bansa. I mean, it's possible.
And it's not parang a mark of lack of nationalism anymore, no? Parang, oo, kasi parang, yun, at least there's an option. But, Rich, ikaw, kunyari, when you wrote those articles at tinotroll ka, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, probably I have to reflect back on all of that. Pero ngayon pala, I'm thinking of the next book to write. Looking at the service, I think I have to write on another person soon, no?
Ay, wag naman sana.
God willing, hindi. Kailangan, but I'm already making pitches na to publishers. But regardless,
Ikaw
honestly, I mean, I'm still absorbing what happened over the past few years. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, me traveling a lot. I mean, there are times I'm traveling twice intercontinental within 2 weeks or a month. It was a way to let some steam off kasi nakakabaliw na. And to be honest, I didn't feel very safe. I mean, for a very long time, pag may dumadaan na motor, I get jitters. I have a certain reflex, no? Yung fear na yan na hindi na wala na. I'm not giving tips to my enemies, but the problem has been there. But online naman, I think I medyo kinapal ko naman yung mukha ko so I can better deal with it. And I have my own troll army na rin on my pages and also my mga
troll army.
I think they got inspired, but
tsaka YouTube audience mo, ever-growing YouTube audience.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is crazy, right? And TikTok.
Pero yan.
So, I'm looking at that, but yun nga, actually, there are times, Noel, na parang kunyari, nag-order ka something, or kunyari, actually, na-hospital ako the other week na because of food poisoning or something because my immunity was down and all. For some reason, subscriber ko pala yung mga nag-alaga sa akin. So I was just making sure, have I said the wrong thing? Sir, maganda analysis mo, balance ka. Okay, I feel safe. Go ahead. Take care of me.
Basta ilagay mo kami sa last will and testament mo.
Yun lang, Noel. So, kung medyo solid north ka sa ako ngayon, diba? So, I'm just watching around. Like, I can't say more. I'll just keep it there.
Okay, let's go economic. Let's go later pa yung your role as authors and as opinion shapers. Pero sa economics at this point, you think paano tayo makakaahon, Rich? Dito sa nangyayari ngayon?
Yeah, so we had 5 quarters of recession straight, which is the worst, I think, at least in the region. There was a study by the International Monetary Fund na lumabas na sinasabi the Philippines will have the most decline relative to pre-pandemic potential niya. So I think we're gonna grow at 13% below what we would have grown at had there not been the pandemic or a more effective pandemic response had happened, which is not the case. So yung potential natin talaga sobrang bumaba compared dun sa ibang countries. Kasi yung nga mismanage natin yan. But honestly,
sabi ni Carl Chua ng NEDA, kaya pa.
Of course, that's what they're gonna say, right? I mean,
kasi naman, Richard, partida, di ba? Kung sobrang baba ka ng sobrang tagal, mas madali nang umakyat kasi
galing ka sa negative.
Right?
The base is so low. But it looks like tama yung prediction ng ibang economists like Economist Intelligence Unit na mukhang we're looking at late this year para magkaroon ng full recovery from the 2 years of pandemic. So kung sino maging next president, he's gonna do a lot of credit grabbing or hopefully they'll not do that. But that person will be in a good position, no? And then there's gonna be election spending boost, hopefully to a certain degree that will push things up. But my worry is that there's going to be what economists call scarring, long-term economic scarring. So maraming trabaho na wala na hindi na babalik. Maraming trabaho na magkakaroon na highly digitalized, high levels of functional literacy kailangan na we won't be able to fill that up kasi hindi handa yung ating workforce. No? And my worry really is that, and Lelo should know this very well, I mean, whenever I'm in Stanford in California, I joke that, people are busy here to make the rest of the world unemployed because you have artificial intelligence, you have fourth industrial revolution. A lot of jobs are now being automated at a scary pace, no? So I'm not sure kung handa ang Pilipinas. Even the call center industry could be affected. Kaya mahalaga talaga yung next president natin has a basic sense of these big trend lines in globalization, in automation, etc. At hihanda yung ating bansa because we're not only losing from the pandemic, we're also going to lose big from automation and new trends in globalization and
automation
trade.
Nga, di ba? Yung contract
I'm very worried. I'm very worried for that. Yeah.
In a way, naisip ko lang, Richard, malas talaga, di ba? Kasi nagkasabay because a lot of our growth was really driven by things like the
Service.
BPO industry, service industry. Yan yung lumalaki since the 2000s. Since the administration, I mean, to be fair to her, since the administration of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, straight into Noynoy Aquino and into the early Duterte years. But that was never going to be sustainable because of automation nga. So at the point that it's becoming unsustainable, saka ka patatamaan ng pandemic, medyo masakit yun.
Ang sakit,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's really a convergence of many bad things coming together. Kaya mahalaga talaga clincher yung next administration. Ayusin talaga nila yan. We have to catch up. I mean, we see Vietnam already is releasing their electric cars. Sumasabay na sila sa Tesla among others. I mean, amazing. I was in Vietnam the other year. Nakita ko, I saw their cars, new cars. And they said, we're not going to make cheap cars. We're going to make good cars. And we're going to compete globally. And I'm looking at Vietnam, which is per capita poorer than the Philippines until just the other year. And they're already at that level of manufacturing power. At saka yung pagtitignan mo rin yung Noel, no, yung scoring natin sa PISA, math and sciences, basic English literacy. Oh my god. I mean, it's really, really troubling. No, so parang lasagna ito ng mga pagkakulang sa ating edukasyon at saka preparing our people. And my fear is that we may be starting to pay the price for that. While our neighbors, Taiwan, Vietnam have been growing. Taiwan, I think, will grow 6% this year dahil sa exports nila ng mga computer chips and high-end goods. We're not a manufacturing country. And we're going to lose big out of this. And we're giving all our minerals away. I'm in Cordilleras. So I go around, I see all these Chinese companies getting our minerals and all. Good luck. What are you going to use when we need to manufacture? So these are the medium long terms I'm worried. I'm also very worried about.
One of the things that Richard and I agree on talaga is hindi pala uso yung idea ng manufacturing. Because nauso at one point to keep saying na because it's a knowledge economy, we have to invest in services. And to a certain degree, you know, we were complacent as a result of that. Right. But what we see is that people are physical and material beings. They want stuff. Right. They buy stuff. So until we really invest in our exports or in export industry, mahina tayo. And you know, if Vietnam is going to work on electronic cars na maganda, talaga mapapag-iwanan talaga tayo. And just to reinforce, you know, kind of basic economics, why do we need exports? Because exports bring in money into the country. Kung ano yung kinita mo sa labas, ibabalik mo. Whereas yung imports, of course, is money moving outside of the country, right? And so we really need to think about certain things. Like, for example, you know, like ko sabi, hindi necessarily bad thing na bumagsak ang presyo ng piso kasi kung bumagsak ang presyo ng piso, exports become more competitive, for example.
Pero sabi naman ng media,
Noel, I'm sorry for cutting you. I mean, the thing kasi, Noel, is because of our OFWs since Marcos times, right? We were tinakpan natin itong problema natin.
Exhaust valve, tawag dyan, exhaust valve.
Exactly. So kasi pumapasok yung dollars galing sa mga OFWs even in the hardest of times, and I've seen our OFWs abroad in Middle East among others, talagang grabe yung trabaho nila and stress sila and all, they'll do anything. So dahil sa mga yan, yung mga pasaway dito, they're not doing their job. They're not doing proper industrial policy. They're not doing proper trade policy. A lot of our candidates, I don't even know if they have basic literacy in understanding supply chain economics or yung mga ganun. So honestly, I'm very, very worried about
dapat alam mo yung Richard, ewan kung kung agree ka sa akin, it is at this point that we really need to think about strengthening the DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry as an institution. Yan yung cabinet office na talagang pagkaliit-liit ng budget, but it actually should be in the forefront of economic development because we need to build our SMEs, need to build our export center. Hindi pwedeng parang macroeconomic planning lang sa NEDA na nangyayari or finance or DOF lang or budget lang. Kailangan talaga
we can actually
may malakas na organization na nakatutok sa mga business na kampi natin sa pagpapalago ng Pilipinas.
Hindi lang numbers, di ba? But it seems like natali sila nga ngayon dun sa huwag kayo magtaas ng presyo kasi pandemya. Ganun yung ingat kayo.
Saka, don't put entrepreneurs there. Put people who actually understand policy making and all. Kasi ang counterpart nun, yung MITI sa Japan and South Korea had that. Ang mga tao din nilagay dyan, technocrats talaga. Yung mga NEDA level. So I think it's very important na, and in other countries you have seen like Australia, meron silang DFAT. So yung foreign affairs at trade nila ay sinama. Consolidated yan. The same also I think in Netherlands among others that I've seen. So sa kanila, your diplomats are already trade policy guys who are there to promote your trade, your products, and bring in investments and all of that. So feeling ko yung ating birokrasya, tama talaga si Lelo dyan, ay hindi pa rin nag-catch up dun sa mga realidad ng ating ekonomiya at saka yung global economy, no?
So and they're not energized, no? Parang walang link yung bawat ahensya. Yung kanya-kanya sila ngayon. Tapos ang pinagmamalaki naman nila ngayon, yung roads natin na maayos or maraming roads yung natapos. Pero towards what, no? Parang at this point, agriculture pa din. So how will that solve yung economic problem natin?
I'm sure Lelo has a lot to say on this. Ang akin lang naman is, in fairness, I will give credit to the Duterte administration for increasing, almost doubling yung capital outlay spending natin. So from around 2.5%, 5% na. Kaya maraming mga infrastructure yung natatapos. And generally, infrastructure build-up can create jobs in the meantime and also facilitate long-term growth. But we really need to move to the next level. We have to have green infrastructure to prepare us for climate change, climate proofing kailangan. We need an infrastructure that actually can connect to our manufacturing sites and export sites. So this is more like transportation roads lang nilalagay or mawala lang traffic. As important as that, hindi pa tayo nag-next level.
Pero if you think about it in electoral terms, that's I think bakit sikat yung isang kandidato ngayon. Because he makes it seem as if lahat ng tayo dito sa Pilipinas ay pinatayo ng tatay niya, right? And I think that resonates because people do want to see their government working in a material way. Gusto lang nakikita nila. Concrete,
Literally concrete.
And there are, si Professor Ceci Cruz of UCLA says that at least on a local government level, Filipinos listen to policy. So kung may kandidato sa local na sinabi niya, papatayo niya yan, napatayo niya yan, that person gets rewarded electorally. So, hindi malayo na nangyayari rin yun on a national level. And that's where this expectation that presidents should invest in infrastructure comes from. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. No, it's not a bad thing that a lot of Filipinos want a president na big on infrastructure. Problema lang, a president should be big on infrastructure, but they shouldn't, corrupt, be super corrupt. One of the most corrupt presidents in the history of the world. And you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ferdinand Marcos, right?
Yeah. So, after this, parang, magkikita yung mag-ina niyan sa Senate eventually, ang sakit. Parang, yun yung repercussions. And people experience that though, na 15 minutes ka lang from Quezon City to Alabang. Parang, they really equate everything into yung comfort, parang momentary comfort na nararanasan nila. But, yung utang, paano yun? Si Leloy was saying, hindi naman problemang umangutang, di ba, Leloy? You're saying that?
Yeah. I mean, the first, yung laging clarification na ginagawa ko is that the biggest myth we have about economics is yung tinatawag yung central neoliberal myth, which is that a country is a household and the president of a country is like a miserly or matipid na nanay na dapat ipunin lahat ng pera. A country is not like that because a country is not a household. For one thing, a country can print money. A country can borrow from other sources and a country can modify tax rates. So maraming levers yung lipunan. Hindi lang sweldo yung napapagpunan ng bansa ng pera. Marami ang levers at marami ang policy and it has things like bonds, for example. And yung utang, for example, when it's not always foreign loans. In fact, we see that most of our loans are domestic. Which means if the government pays back those loans, it's mostly paying back those loans to Filipino citizens who ideally would spend those loans in the Philippines. So that's the first thing we need to say about utang. Don't think about it as a household because completely disanalogous lang talaga. Now, when it comes to the specifics, I still think na Rep. Stella Kimbo's rice bill should have been passed early on in the pandemic, and that could have averted a lot of the crises we went through.
In principle, tama. I mean, I agree with that. In fact, Jokno, one reason I was a little bit interested with Jokno being there kasi Jokno is known for that guy. He doesn't believe in, he's not as concerned with inflation and debt levels and all. Medyo aggressive siya and all. And he got rewarded again for one of the best central bankers, in fairness to him. And when he was in DBM, also he did job. But the thing is, the devil is really in the details. So, for instance, it's how are debts contracted? Is this odious debt? Kasi yun yung problema natin kay Marcos time. There's no problem getting debt if you invest it in something that produces you more than what you borrowed from, right? So you'll take care of the interest and all. But the problem is if purong odious debt yan, napunta sa corruption, napunta sa cronies, napunta sa kalokohan, napunta sa underproductive investments, then actually you may pay a price down the road. Because remember, meron tayong sovereign credit rating. So again, Lelo is absolutely correct on this issue. But at the same time, we have also these credit rating agencies who are not very impressed with some emerging markets like the Philippines. And sometimes they look at some indicators in a very shallow way, and based on that, they can downgrade us. Now, anong effect nun? Kasi kung bumaba yung ating credit rating,
interest rate,
that will make it expensive for us to borrow from abroad, including during the pandemic time. So again, I agree with Lelo in principle, and I think this applies to many productive, export-oriented manufacturing economies to keep on. But is the Philippines fitting that kind of restriction and dynamics? I'm not 100% sure.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, because the more we bury ourselves in this hole, the more nawawalan ng tiwala sa atin yung credit ratings agencies. Actually, early on in the pandemic nga, to be fair to the Duterte administration, it had built up really good credit rating. So that was the moment to actually cash in, right?
Secretary Rodriguez
had done a great
but
job.
I remember you telling me, Leloy, dapat pwede pa tayong umutang ng mas marami at bigay ayuda ng mga tao. Di ba? Yung during the time, yung first time ng pandemic. But now, kasi, utang ng utang, pero yun nga, people, while may hearing sa Congress, and you hear a lot of those spendings na parang, yun talaga yung priority. So, sa dami sa Cheetah Escudero would say that, no? Sa dami ng inutang, parang napupunta nga ba dun sa dapat puntahan?
Sa dami ng inutang natin, napupunta ba dapat sa pinupuntahan?
Sana naman sa ibang talas nila yan. Well, actually, if you look at the Philippines, our spending, stimulus spending or pandemic recovery spending is actually low compared to our neighbors, both on a per capita basis and a share of our gross domestic product. So actually, hindi masyadong gumastos ng administration na to in terms of getting the economy back on the table at saka yung ayuda levels. So yun ang medyo hindi ko naiintindihan bakit.
Sinasabing wala na tayong pera. Wala na tayong pera. Parang,
well, that's ridiculous. I mean, after all, ang ganda ng access natin sa international markets because of our sovereign credit rating. Andito ang Asian Development Bank sa Pilipinas, let's not forget, it's literally in the Philippines. The World Bank offered us a lot. So I don't know anong pinagsasabi ng mga yan. Actually, I'm disappointed with our technocrats for being too conservative during this pandemic. They should have aggressively spent big time, big ayuda, get people going, spending. Kasi isang thing, Noel, for a while, di ba? Alam mo naman saan tayo nakatira, malapit sa mall. For a while, hindi ako pumunta sa mall. Nadidepress ako. Walang tao or walang nagsispend. Because people are scared, di ba? This is psychology na eh. When people are scared, there's no animal spirits, they're not spending. Ano yun, downward spiral na yan. So that's where the government steps in and pushes it up, yung Keynesian response.
Merong argument si former NAPSI Undersecretary ko sa Jude Esguerra early on in the pandemic. Damn if you do, damn if you don't eh. Kasi kung hindi ka kung mangutang ka, kakaroon ka ng utang. Kung hindi ka mangutang, walang pera magsa-circulate, yung tax base mo guguho kasi walang pera, walang pambayad na tax. Magkakaroon ka rin ng utang, di ba? So umutang ka na lang.
Might as well.
Pero gamitin mo sa tama, di ba? Parang gano'n.
Gamitin mo sa tama.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, hindi mafarmali, hindi kung saan napupunta.
And then which brings us to yun nga. Well, our political situation, parang worse sa outrage yun. Magandang tagline yun. Pero unang tanong, tuloy elections. Well, yun yung kinakatakot ng mga tao, di ba? Na because of the COVID situation, tama ka, Richard, pwedeng magamit yan na tipong, ang daming limitation hanggang matakot yung mga tao. Postpone na lang natin. Is that possible?
Yeah, one thing I'm worried about, Noel, is asymmetrical demobilization. No, so generally when you have restrictions imposed during elections, hindi parehas yung epekto niya sa iba't ibang kampo. So yung mga kampo na may block voting, or alam mo na, they have other ways of making people vote, they may still do fine. Pero yung mga candidates who rely on volunteers, who rely on, yung mga middle class na first time lang bumoto, yan ang pwede matakot. So actually, ang mangyari dyan is, yung turnout dun sa ibang camps could remain high because meron silang organized block voting no matter what, di ba? Then dun sa ibang camps na more relying on volunteers, middle class, or people are a bit sensitive to conditions, baka sila kumonti. So actually, it can have asymmetrical negative impact on certain camps versus the others. So that's one thing I'm looking at from a kind of political science point of view. Yun ang isang concern ko. The other concern is, President Duterte is still our president until June, right? Let's not forget. We're counting him out as if he doesn't exist. But Duterte being Duterte, he's a guy, he loves attention, he loves power. He might just...
Tsaka may leak sa last minute. Tsaka mahilig sa last minute.
So,
no?
yung mga plot twist or twisted plot na yan, I'm still not ruling it out. I'm still not ruling it out. So, anything can happen.
Kunyari, yung mga tao wouldn't like be, yun again, yung outrage, no? Because dati, di ba, yung pagpapalawig lang ng power ng mga tao, yung mga chacha, ayaw na, no? Pero ito yung election, sa tingin mo, i-give up? Well, sa states, Leloy, anong nangyari yun? Parang sinabi na, no, may pandemic, but natuloy yung political process.
Yeah, pumila pa rin yung I think energized kasi talaga yung mga base sa US because of the polarization of politics between the Democrats and the Republicans, right? So it was going to be an important election regardless. Pero having said that, kahit gano'n ka-polarized ang US, mas maganda pa rin ang electoral turnout ng Pilipino kaysa sa Amerikano. We really vote, right? So we really vote. So hopefully the pandemic won't prevent us from doing what we love doing, which is voting.
But Rich, well, you saw people like lining up for registration, di ba?
Yes.
4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Yan yung conscientized, parang citizenry.
Yeah, yun nga. My concern is baka etong mga to ang mas maging negatively affected with certain restrictions or certain scaremongering, etc. Again, I'm not saying that kasi I'm not gonna say some certain things, but in situations where there's mass vote buying, there's pressure on you to show up during the day of election, mas mataas ang turnout siguro ng mga groups na yun kaysa yung mga walang vote buying at nagre-rely doon sa talaga sa mga taos puso talaga. But suddenly, they may half-second concern kasi nakakatakot, may restrictions. Do you get what I'm saying? Yun yung worry ko dito na there will be asymmetrical demobilization whereby one camp will suffer more reduction in turnout than other count, even though on the gross level, hindi ganun kalaking difference. So we may go from 85% turnout to, let's say, 75%, but the 10% reduction will actually have far more negative impact on one camp than the other camp. Yun yung concern ko.
Mataas pa rin, pero relevant yung margin.
Pero yung proportion niya, napaka-grabe dun sa isang camp. Again, I didn't want to say more because we have to do more studies for me to say that, but we have seen that in other countries. Not during pandemic, but for other reasons whereby certain progressive parties lost more than conservative parties when certain variables were introduced into the picture. So, yun yung isang tinitignan ko dito na hindi naman yung Noel per se. But you're absolutely right, Noel and Leloy, no? We Filipinos count voting as kind of a sacred right, no? We don't see it as a kind of a formal legal thing. That's why even during Marcos, there had to be some elections, right? I mean, the idea of Noel is just an abomination that I think even Duterte would not dare to do.
Yeah.
But will there be some delays or shenanigans? That's where I'm a little bit more...
Okay. Leloy, what do you think about that? Well,
I think that's an interesting theory, pero hindi pa naman ata tinatayan ni Richard yung buong bahay niya dun sa theory. It's
because it's the Philippines. I haven't seen that yet. Yeah.
It's speculation.
Pero pwede.
But it makes sense, right? But it makes sense, right? Yeah.
It makes sense. On the other hand, I do hope na maraming gana because nga may polarization, and the polarization in the Philippines is really Marcos, and we know that when there's polarization, there's greater turnout. So I wonder
but I want to feel that.
Well.
I really want to feel that now kasi hindi ko pa rin nakadaramdaman well.
Tama si Noel I'm not I mean, where I am, I haven't seen anything. There's no sense. I'm sorry, man.
Ikaw naman.
Wala. I've been in solid north for...
Yung hindi pag-attend nung COMELEC hearing.
Exactly.
Yung outrage, di ba?
Isn't that contempt for our democratic institutions? But people are just laughing at it and mimifying it. That's insane.
I know. So parang, well, at least sa media nyo sa US na nalalabas yan. Sa atin hanggang social media, and then wala talaga. Parang discredit until the next until the time when he appears on court. Well, we'll never see kung ano yung next moves. No, but yung surveys, Richard, you think mag-iiba pa yan, or paano mag-iiba, or paano anong major
yan na. Okay, I'm gonna say very controversial things. Okay.
Go.
Well, nag-leak yung some of the data from Okta Research, for instance, that looks at variability in terms of willingness of people to change their ideas about their first preference, no? Yeah. So mukhang ang lalabas dito is Marcos can confidently rely on 25% of the votes to up to 30% based on dun sa variability na nakita natin, which is quite a big number. And in fact, Marcos tends to have a higher degree of solid supporters than many other candidates, no? So when you look at that, that's gonna create some concern for the other camps. Nonetheless,
let's break it down. The loyal concern is that why? Parang dahil loyalist talaga sila, or number two, dahil feeling nila underdog siya the whole time. Oh, well,
No, a lot of them, Noel, are never Lenny, never liberal voters. I think this is something we never talk. We rarely talk about. We talk about never Marcos people, but there are also never Lenny, never liberal people. So that's one thing. There's also
sila yung naniniwala na yung mga gold ng mga Marcoses pwede pag na-elect siya to office, mabibigyan sila.
Talano niya Mashita. We have anecdotal evidence from friends and campaign that, you know, in far-flung areas, even in Cebu and all, people talk about the Talano gold situation in ways that makes you worried, like what's going on. And then, of course, there's also Sara people. In fact, you see, this is where Marcos really got the bump. Mindanao numbers. His number is Mindanao proportional is even higher than NCR and Luzon, which is crazy. Yeah. But it's understandable because that's the Sara vote going to him. Yeah. So for me, the only way for Lenny,
halos walang din si Pacquiao. Kahit sa Mindanao.
I was thinking, sorry.
Yeah, sa dami ng pera niyang nilalabas, no?
Pacquiao will have a wall there, kind of like a wall there, or kind of step in, or because of the Marcos, where Marcos' dictatorship was worst was in Mindanao, right? That's where violence happened. Yeah. So you would have thought siguro that historical memory, which is stronger there than other places. But it didn't. So the Sara machinery is really the big factor there. So honestly, if you're a Lenny supporter, you would hope that someone like Isko would come up at the expense of Bongbong Marcos, because Isko is the number one second preference, and he has now more overlap with Marcos than obviously with the Len camp and
as we speak now, they're launching the Isa, no? The Isko Sara tandem.
Kasi exactly. Na may ganon din na, parang may ganon eh. Parang isa, ganon.
So now,
exactly.
So, 3 o'clock ngayon, habang nag-uusap tayo, yun, ilo-launch yun. And you see, parang makakatulong ba yun sa pag-shake up ng survey results so far? Or
I think the Isko camp and all, among others, because I also interviewed Isko, no, just recently, because I'm trying to interview the presidential candidates and all, and sila Claudio, and hopefully you know who, and the rest. Well, mukhang the Isko people are hoping that kung tutuloy yung mga debates and discussions, although no one knows if Bongbong will also show up in the debates. That's a lot of problem we have, no? Baka doon medyo pwede silang bumawi, because if you look at it, Lenny, Isko, a lot of candidates did a lot during pandemic time. At yung sasabihin siguro nila is, ikaw, Bongbong, ano ang bag mo, di ba? Yeah. Which I think is something that could appeal to a lot of very practical-minded people. You need someone who's a doer, gets things done.
Yung pwede pang masway? Yung mga soft Bongbong or soft yun?
Which is around 51% of his votes, which is like 51 or 50%. So you're looking at 25-26% that can still shift to other candidates like Isko, like, I don't know, Lacson, among others who can benefit from that because of some overlap ideologically, etc. So they're hoping they can catch up. And then, of course, you know, Isko hopes that Duterte will support him, not only verbally, but also all the way, no? So especially in Mindanao, because I think the Isko camp is parang, I think their ambasa nila dito is, if Duterte parang, you know, drops the gauntlet, a lot of Mindanao people will actually go towards Isko or whoever endorses, no? But is that valid? Course, I don't know. But
of course, marami silang di lang yun ang inaasahan na. Inaasahan nila disqualification. That is also contingent. Wag na tayo maglokan. This is a Duterte court. This is also contingent on what Duterte wants. I think in disqualification case, a lot of it is it's not exclusively gonna ride on that, but I think his voice is going to matter when you look at the Supreme Court decision.
And let's not forget, these people in the COMELEC, or definitely in Supreme Court, they also look at the shadow of the future. Yes, Duterte may be the president now, but if the most likely next president is someone that, you know, pwede mong babanggain, you're gonna bet on the future, which is going to be the next 6 years, than the last 4 months of a guy who's more or less a lame dog. So that's where the uncertainty comes in. Not just because Duterte is the president now doesn't mean tataya sila sa kanya. In fact, that's the reason why I had some concerns, and I was working in the government back then, when Aquino went after some of the appointees of Arroyo. I mean, knowing how bamboo people can get, my concern was, I don't think these people will back up Arroyo anymore once she's out of office. They're going to go and take care of themselves. And I can give you many examples of how that works. So the shadow of the future sometimes is more important than twilight months of a lame duck president or relatively lame duck president. That's where, for me, medyo, I'm not very sure even Duterte may have the final say on this. Feeling ko magkaka-split-split din yan eh. If Comelec says go, Supreme Court mag-split-split din yan. So, going back to that, sorry to cut you on that. For me, Lelo and Noel, the disqualification case can actually drag on. If let's say it could go to the Supreme, a la Grace Poe, that in itself could be a variable. Because the shadow of uncertainty over whether ma-disqualify ba or hindi could give opening to the second preferences and all to come forward.
But will they have a resolution on that before the elections, or it will drag till the elections?
It depends on Supreme Court, because if Comelec says go, but Supreme Court can sit on it, no? And we're hearing some stuff from some of the justices who are saying maybe this is a political question and all. Magulo yan.
And also, I mean, ito yung biggest plot twist. Who is the mentor of Sara Duterte? The mentor of Sara Duterte is the master of extracting more years from the presidency by completing the term of a disgraced president.
Arroyo, no?
Arroyo, right?
Yes.
So, ano pwedeng laro niyan? Bongbong becomes president, mahina, i-operate ng Sara Duterte camp dahil nga may disqualification cases and corruption cases. Pwede pa silang pumasok doon, maka 9 years or even more as president. I mean, Philippine politics is crazy. I'm not predicting this will happen. Pero kung titignan mo lang yung abangan ng susunod na kabanata ng Pilipinas, pwede mangyari. And of course, the late great Chito Gascon said something that, I mean, I don't know if I take comfort from it or if it makes me worried, but he said, he used to say all the time, things will get worse before they get better. And, I hate to say this, but there's a good chance that will happen.
But aren't we in that worst situation yet? Mukhang hindi pa rin, no? So, but realignments, Rich, before the election. You think people will give way somehow? Like the Ping Lacson of the world or Agbani Pacquiao?
Yeah, the thing kasi, I think both Ping Lacson and Isko are hanging on because they're looking at the second preference numbers. So their hope is to just switch it. So I think so long as their second preference numbers is high, I don't think magbaback out either of them, especially Lacson, no. So I think that's one concern we're seeing. But at the end of the day, Noel, this goes back to the donors, backers, insiders, operators. At alam natin nagbabanwagon mga yan, no. So they can just leave you dry in the air, no. If talagang numbers may hindi nag-improve by say middle of February or already by March, no? So in that sense, may time limit din yan because we don't have real political parties. So it's possible you'll be in the race, but you're already immaterial. But on the next level of discussion, let's say magbaback out sila to endorse someone else. It should be done in an active way. So let's say kunyari candidate X backs out. He should. Hindi lang endorse, as in go together, they will go around, which is something that has never been done because we don't have runoff elections. So we have no culture of former rivals allying against another rival or enemy, right? But that has to happen if
not immediately change. At least, not in the same election cycle. Maybe in the next election cycle they'll do it.
Correct.
So yun yung tinitignan ko dito yung in terms of the alignments na
pero nag-endorse si President Duterte ng candidate niya for president dahil may negotiations pa. Can he do that negotiation with Bongbong, for example?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, Duterte is a hedger-in-chief, no? He always hedges his bets. Kaya nga, ang dami mga plot twists sa Pilipinas. He really wants to protect his interests. So he's not gonna... I mean, didn't the late President Aquino kind of also hedge, right? He was not very clear at some point si Grace pa talaga or si Mar, and that created issues. But Duterte, he just hedges by because he never wants to put all his eggs in one basket, right? So knowing Duterte, I don't think he's gonna... make a kind of a major move potentially until it's too late, right? Because I think his instinct for hedging is stronger.
The Marcos themselves, of course, did not escalate the conflict. So I mean, Marcos, nung binabanata ni Duterte si Bongbong, the first thing she said publicly, the lines of communication, Mr. President, are open. So hindi nag-engage in a tit for tat, and I think that's one of the strengths of the Marcoses campaign.
And nag-split yung House of Duterte. And Lelo, nag-split din yung House of Duterte because clearly, from Sara's point of view, the future is in alliance with the Marcoses. This is for me, this is the counter-revolutionary movement of the Philippines. This is the far more powerful, I would say, movement than anything else we have seen in their side.
Yung Marcos Restoration, because this was the slow burn long-term project that began as early as 92. So,
Yes.
sabi nga ni Manolo Quezon, for example, if you took the votes of Danding Cuangco and those who would have voted for Imelda Marcos, that would have been a formidable electoral share even in 92. And that
Yes.
reflected that even as early as, 6 years after the displacement of the Marcoses, meron ka ng pro-Marcos vote na nandyan na malakas at formidable.
That's true.
25%, roughly 25% of the votes, they could always hold on to that. So the question is, ano yung negotiated vote na pwede nila increase? And now with Sara on their side and Arroyo on their side, and them not picking all-out fight with Duterte, and even Duterte thinking twice, they're in a very good position from an electoral standpoint. But again, this is minus all the curveballs that can still come because there are many cross-cutting interests and conflicts of interest nangyari dito. And I'm not going to underestimate also other candidates. I think Lenny was always underestimated and she always over-delivered. So let's see if she's going to pull that off. And I'm still not going to count out Lacson or Isko or even Pacquiao for that matter. Those guys can still pull off some magic moments. Remember, yung star ng mga debates last time was really Duterte. He was the, he was the audience impact guy, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And Binay was the big loser. He was the leading guy by February, but after debates, he was gone. So the debates could be a big factor. That's why I'm concerned. Magpakita ba si Bongbong or baka mag-ano na naman siya? Hindi na naman siya magpakita.
Required naman yun. But then, on the flip side, kunyari, will the business sector, church, determine also a big chunk of the voters? The youth, for example?
Well, the business sector is the business sectors are going to play safe. So probably they go 40% candidate X, 30% candidate Y, 20%. So it's just a proportion issue. They're never going to go against the candidate because they want to play safe and they want to survive. They got billions of dollars to protect. Right?
Na naman sila
As for the religious sector, well, the Catholic Church is not the kind of force it used to be. And this has been the reality for at least a decade. We saw that on RH Bill, panon pa lang ni Aquino. And we saw the what I call evangelical groups, who have been very influential in terms of block voting and all. So for me, it doesn't operate that way kasi hindi na monolithic yung business landscape or religious organization and movement landscape. It's a very stratified, multifarious, almost orchidaceous kind of political landscape. And in this landscape, those who have the resources and who make the right deals, they'll be in a good position to just cut off some chunk and corner the elections next year.
I remember I remember there was a book that, for me, at one point explained very well the patterns of post-independence politics in the Philippines. A book by Eva Lotte Hedman called "In the Name of Civil Society," and yung thesis niya was that Philippine politics is determined by a kind of dominant bloc, and the dominant bloc consists of the U.S. first and foremost, the Catholic Church, and a kind of business-oriented civil society. So ito yung mga kind of MBC, for example. But if you look at those 3 groups now in the context of today's politics, parang ang hina na nila. So the Catholic Church, as Richard said, parang ang hina na ng kapangyarihan. Yung US, it's riven with its own contradictions and with its own problems. So it can't interfere in the Philippines anymore. And also, it doesn't care about the Philippines as much as it used
we're not
to
that
during the time of the Cold
anymore.
War. We're not important, irrelevant tayo sa kanila. And then of course, hindi na lang US yung power player dito. China is the big power player. So those two determinants of Philippine politics, tanggalin mo na yan, di ba? And then the other one, yung business, well, hindi rin naman malinaw kung ano yung gusto ng business. So how do you analyze Philippine politics in the 2020, in these new 20s? A lot of the old predictors no longer work. So magkakandara pa yung mga political scientists, yung mga historian, kagaya ni Richard and myself, trying to figure out overarching ways of explaining this new interregnum we're in. And it's fun, it's scary, and it's unpredictable.
No, but
I think Walden said something like, it's sociologically interesting, politically horrifying. I think this is
Yung
mga terms, okay yun. Pero can we just copy the US, for example, when you have A-lister stars in Hollywood? And the major endorsers handling their influences. Kaya ba natin
but that didn't work for Hillary Clinton, right? Like she had Beyonce and all, and then Trump had like these D-listers, and it worked for Trump.
I mean, it did. Pero kasi yung sa US, meron na rin perception na completely biased yung mga celebrities, di ba? So, in the eyes of a lot of Trumpists, the celebrities are the equivalent of our Dilawan. Sila yung mga perennially biased and elitist liberals. So for example, I mean, one of my favorite celebrities in the world is LeBron James, and he was the star of the Cleveland Cavaliers when Hillary Clinton was running in Ohio and needed to win Ohio, and LeBron went all out. Talo pa rin si Hillary sa Ohio.
Yeah, wala. Minsan magba-backfire pa nga yan eh. Minsan magba-backfire pa yan. It makes it more, like, makes the candidate more elitist or out of touch. Or ay hanggang celebrity politics. So it doesn't necessarily work. But the ABS-CBN issue could be a significant issue in these elections depending on how different players play this out. I mean, it's interesting to see that even IME has been suggesting that maybe they'll be okay with ABS returning, the franchise returning. So I think the Marcoses want to also avoid some sort of backlash on the ABS-CBN issue. Something that Tulfo had to reconsider kasi nagka-backlash yung DDS sa kanya. But the Marcoses are very confident. It's like, okay, ABS, we can talk about it. You know, don't worry.
Here's the other thing: we actually don't know what the Marcoses are going to do. Diba? Parang it's a kind of very, parang I asked a couple of weeks back. Bongbong Marcos is a Marcos, but is he a Marcosian? Kasi at least for Ferdinand Marcos, malinaw yung gusto niyang gawin. Gusto niya ng constitutional authoritarianism, and he called it a constitutional authoritarianism, which means ako ang presidente hanggang mamatay ako. Which means, the House of Representatives will follow me. If there's going to be a parliament, I'm going to be the prime minister. Now, does Bongbong Marcos believe in this? Does he want to? Does he have a plan of becoming president for life? If he
my concern there is the tail might.
I have no idea, and I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm saying this is another one of those unpredictable.
It's just not going to be the same script.
Iba yung script.
Yeah, I mean, the history doesn't repeat, but it may rhyme, and also the tail might wag the dog, because we know that Bongbong Marcos is not like his father. He's not this kind of micromanager, gonna look at every aspect of things. But the whole Marcoses are still there. I mean, I can name more names, and then Enrile might come in. There's GMA, there's Sara. So my thing is, even if Bongbong himself might not be gung-ho on regime change or anything like that, there are going to be a lot of people around him who will try to push it in that direction, and he'll be just hands off. And that in itself will bring us...
Wala ka ng boss, wala ka ng apolakay sa Philippine politics. Because even if Bongbong Marcos tries to assert himself, a lot of people who put him there are going to lay claim to the booty, namely the Arroyos, the Estradas, everyone else. So you have a multipolar democracy here in the Philippines. And one of the reasons why Philippine democracy is alive is because ang daming gahaman who won't allow one person to lord it over everyone else. They want their turn. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but this is classic, analysis of Philippine society. It is a kind of elite democracy, kind of musical chairs. No one stays there forever because another greedy person will want his or her turn in power.
So I think there will be some hardcore. Sorry about that. There'll be some hardcore Marcos people, and not maybe more fond of the father than even the son. Right? The son is more like the symbolic representation. Who will really push for historical revisionism? Who will aggressively go after some middle class, civil society, opposition people? After some journalists, I won't be surprised that will be the case even more than under Duterte. Because Duterte, he came to Manila. These guys are pros. They know.
Actually, I wouldn't want to be a professor in UP under Bongbong Marcos presidency because it's going to be very, very hard to be a kind of independent academic in the context of a presidency. You remember, it's a state
or journalist. I mean, you cannot even call the guy dictator anymore. Strongman dapat, hindi pwede dictator. I mean, the Marcos cannot be called dictator as much, right? I mean, the term now is the politically correct term is strongman. Isn't that
but he was a dictator, di ba?
I mean, exactly, but that's my point.
Philippines, di ba? Parang they had an issue there. So what can thwart that? Like, what kind of citizenry or what kind of principled individuals or probably media can question those things? Kasi hindi lumalabas to, ha? Or parang wala to sa mainstream media.
Salamat sa'yo, Noel, for us. Go, Lelo, give us a hopeful
well, di ba, parang yun sa mga people on the ground, they're saying, how do you persuade somebody na pro-Marcos? You cannot be black and white about things. Kasi the moment you say, masama lang yan, pure evil lang yan, and ako yung tama, nag-shutdown na yung kausap mo, the first thing you need to do is to make certain concessions. Like the concession I always give is to say na, you're right, we need to look for a president who wants to invest in infrastructure, and I understand why you think the Marcos brand is associated with infrastructure because ang laki nga naman talaga ng infrastructure investment, lalo na relative to the Macapagal administration, grabe yung boost ng infrastructure investment ni Marcos in the mid-60s. So you say, I understand, I want that too, but and then you pivot and you say, can this? But I'm sure that can be done without
Mm.
killing people. I'm sure that can be done without with not as much corruption. And so you say, there's something we agree on. And hindi tayo magkaaway dito. We want the same thing. I think that's the first place you go to, because I think the anti-Marcos narrative has become so moralistic na turned off na kagad yung kausap mo. Nagsimula ka pa lang.
Yeah.
Or another simple confession I make is the depreciation of the peso in 1970 by Ferdinand Marcos. I mean, I don't want to get into the details, but that was one of the wisest economic decisions made in the 60s and 70s. And that was a Marcos decision. It was a decision he knew was going to be difficult to see. In fact, I read his diary. He said, mahirap tong decision na to. I don't want to do this, but my economic advisors told me to do so. So I have to do it. So, he had that naman. He had that kind of political will when needed. And if you give them this, if you give an inch, maybe you can take a mile, because nakikipag-usap ka sa tao using the premise na some of your opinions are valid.
That's
Yeah, I
true,
mean,
but-
I agree. What we need really, Noel, is a nuanced, nuanced resistance, to
That's
revisionism and all of that. I mean, kasi kung labanan ito ng caricature versus caricature, alam natin sino mananalo, sino mas maraming disinformation organization and resources. Manatalo ka talaga, wala kang laban dyan.
But it's
So the best way
getting them on your side, diba? Making
so-
them understand your.
So I think what we have to do here is have a nuanced resistance to revisionism. At the same time, remember, vast majority of Filipino people, they don't have very strong opinions on this. The way that certain camps would think.
That's true.
They don't.
Oo.
They're not
Ito
super
polar,
pro, they're not
tapos
super
banata
anti.
mo kaagad, di ba?
Yeah.
Oh,
So parang
mo kaagad.
cancelled ka
Tapos
na
na yan.
kaagad, right? So
That's true.
well, I'm an Ilocana. I live among Ilocana. So like when we have these discussions, you don't start by saying the guy was evil and dictator and all of that. You start the conversation with the data, but of course in a very colloquial, in a very relaxed way. You talk about, well, he had 21 years. Hindi mo naman siguro makumpara dun sa my 6 years, 4 years. Mga ganun lang. So you don't go with the very strong. You just have a nuanced discussion. Pero ako, favorite ko talaga compare. Taiwan or Korea, sabay din naman sila, or even Mahathir, a little bit later. But para sila may Proton, sila may mga THMC, Pilipinas, saan yung mga companies. But you ask that, you don't impose it on them, say Bobo or something like that. And this is where I think kulang talaga yung approach.
And I mean,
martial law.
At saka yung anti-martial law din minsan talaga, tatamaan kahit yung mga kampe. For example, mga 15 years back, I wrote an article saying that Ninoy Aquino really did have ties with the Communist Party of the Philippines. I interviewed members of the high-ranking members of the Communist Party of the Philippines. I looked at State Department documents, and both the left, meaning yung Communist Party, and kind of more conservative side, the Republican administration said that this guy had ties to the Communist Party of the Philippines, and tama si Marcos for accusing him of having ties to the Communist Party of the Philippines. Two things happened to me. One, ginamit ako ng mga Marcos propagandists, which was sad. The other thing that happened to me was I got backlash from my fellow Dilawans, in quotes, pero parang, that's what the research is saying, right? And if we can't admit that at certain times Marcos, he lied a lot, but sometimes he also told the truth. If we can't admit these certain truths, sasabi talaga tayo, because we're just going to keep reinforcing these ideas of, the kind of biased Dilawan, inflexible Dilawan. So we need a kind of intellectual suppleness and flexibility. That's how we move forward.
The nuanced arguments that parang Richard was saying, no? But now, how can we do that? Like in your own way. Yun nga, parang ang hirap talaga mag-convince ng mga tao. Well, showing them, ang masakit nga, confession nga, most of our colleagues now, especially in media and in technology, no, are the ones engaged in helping propagate these things, huh? Malaki yung sweldo nila. And then mainstream media, for example, Rich, you are in an organization now that has tried to be not controversial. Kasi feeling nila, controversial sa media organization, mawawala kang advertisers at saka mawawala yung supporters mo. So, kita mo ngayon sa news, hardly do they report on political stuff.
Yeah.
Rich,
Speaking of that, Noel, I have to do an interview soon for my something. So I'll try to keep this as short as possible within my standards of what is short. And then I'll leave it to Lele, because I'm sure Lele has a lot of good stuff to say on this. Yeah, ako lang naman, first of all, I mean, from my own personal experience, one thing I learned is that, do not take your privileged position for granted. At the same time, do not think that just because established ka in a mainstream way, you actually matter as much as you are supposed to. Right? That's why you have to reach out. That's why, I started on YouTube. I started podcasting while doing my academic writings and teaching and all of that. We have to really work double time. And in the process, dun mo rin magamay yung pulso ng bayan eh. Kasi hindi mo makikita yan dun sa mga usual places where we operate, right? In our academic circles, in mainstream, big newspaper and all, So that's why you have to go out, you have to reach out, get a little bit wet and muddy in the process. It's okay. It's a learning process. So back in the days, I thought na pag nasa big media ka na or, you're teaching in certain university, established ka na. But I realized that's not how it works. And in fact, people want you to engage with them. That's why I started doing my own Meta Alive. People want to see you. They want spontaneity. They want interaction. They want a feedback loop. Yun ang ina-offer ng bloggers nung other side. They were reachable. They were relatable. So even if ano pa tayo sinasabi or maling-mali talaga or fake news talaga, mas nakaka-relate sila on an emotional level. And let's be honest, we Filipino people are emotional people, even relative to other cultures. Now, we are both Iberian and Malay. And at the same time, we want personal touch. Personal touch is very important. At yun ang nawawala sa mainstream discussions or academics, And let's be honest, I'm sure Lele has a lot to say. Medyo snub din kasi marami sa atin, di ba? In certain position of privilege, Na, nagtrabaho na ako, nag-aral na ako, nag-PhD na ako, ganun. Parang you owe me, you have to listen to me. Well, it doesn't work that way, my friend. It doesn't work that way anymore, right? So I think this is really a reflection of new technologies, new trends. We see that even in martial arts, YouTubers now, hinahamon nila yung mga champions in different fields. It happens. I mean, this is just how the world is operates. So let's stop crying and whining and let's just deal with it. So as much as I agree with Maria Ressa that social media platforms have to be held responsible, they have to get their thing together. I think at the same time, while we're waiting for them to do that, we have to do also something, right? We have to reach out to the people. We have to be more relatable. We have to be more exciting and all. Let's do it. At the end of the day, ang mahalaga naman sa buhay is gawin mo yung dapat mong ginawa. The rest really is beyond you. Bahala ng Diyos
Go back to the ground. Go back to the ground. I think.
And yes, go to the ground and get down and dirty. Yes, definitely.
So may TikTok ka na, Richard?
Yeah, I started doing TikTok and all.
Oh my God.
But what I do,
imagine you doing.
Kamusta response ng mga Gen Z sa'yo, Richard?
Okay naman. So what I do is I take
sumayaw ka na ba?
Hindi naman.
Hindi ka ba sumasayaw?
Actually, napansin ko, the more serious I am, it does better because people expect certain thing from you, from my brand ka na. Like, so if your brand is to be a thinker, yun ang habol nila sa'yo. Or kung brand mo is like a well-dressed professor, yun ang habol. Once you go outside that brand, it doesn't do as well. Baka it's the algorithm, I don't know. So, hindi ako nag-give up, right? So maybe I can...
So we're not gonna expect any K-pop dancing from you anytime soon.
So I will do it, but I don't think it will sell as well as I thought. So
sayang.
Pero totoo, at gagawin niya talaga. But totoo ba yun, Richard? Parang, so you're not after numbers of followers, but really the quality of
impact. Well, I mean, the first TikTok I did that immediately 60,000 views and all of that. Right?
Oh my God.
And ang ginawa ko is I put music of Narcos and then diniscuss ko yung cocaine accusations ni Paolo Duterte. So you played a little bit naughty. It works within 2 hours, 60,000, just like that. No, hindi ko lang masustain because of it actually commitment level yung TikTok.
Mahirap yan.
Mas sarili siyang algorithm and all. I just don't have time. But yung in my own little engagement, nakita ko, okay, this can work in an intelligent way. Just don't. Wag mong pilitin masyado. You don't need to lose your dignity in the process.
It's true.
Hopefully,
and you're doing it on your own, di ba?
I have no team whatsoever.
Wala kang team.
Noel, one thing I'm proud of is whatever I have is a one-man team. And probably it's also because I'm in Ilocano, I don't want to spend too much on like, production team.
We'll end this part na muna, Lelo, even we'll talk about him after. So, so all our commitments to national development, national progress should be anchored into something very personal and concrete. So, paano yan? Yung tipong you're looking for parang a more free and a more harmonious Philippines. But is it anchored on something very concrete as a relationship to people?
Yeah, well, I think it's also about making it relatable to people by giving examples na malapit sa kanilang puso or dun sa daily experiences nila. So for instance, kasama ko si Justice Sereno a few years ago in a conference. She said, how do you explain human rights? Explain mo human rights in a situation whereby parang pinagalitan ka ng nanay mo kahit walang ebidensya, para alam natin lahat iba yung may kasalanan or something like that. Like, very small anecdotal discussions sometimes can make a big difference. You have to concretize abstract ideas. Sa atin, yung human rights, civil liberties, these are ideas that are very close to our heart, non-negotiable. But for a lot of our folks, right, these are too abstract and these are more semantics than reality. So we have to make it concretized for people. So wag tayo tamad with jargons, with just sticking to our our titles and privileged position and all. It doesn't work that way. You have to reach out. And napansin ko naman is that I'm not there yet. I mean, yung masa style wala pa ako nun, no? Or probably I don't want to go Tulfo level, but people appreciate the effort na parang nagre-reach out naman pala tong lokong to, diba? Like, people respond to that. I mean,
so what will be your role in the elections, Richard? You'll be the explainer again.
Yes, and then I'm doing a lot of stuff on the side, so I'm gonna go into the campaigns and all on the ground. Hopefully, if nothing crazy. Yeah, so I'm gonna join different campaigns so that I can write about it more authoritatively and more in a raw manner. I talk to people, ordinary people, etc. Yun ang God willing, yun ang hope if nothing crazy na naman happens in our election. So I want to do it this time kasi yung last elections kay Digong, I was the pontificating guy who kind of got many things right. And I got a lot of things right, unfortunately. So this time I want to go on the ground, a little bit look at yung concrete realities of everyday Filipinos, yung lived experience of elections and what it means to ordinary people. Yun ang hope ko. And if I can make a book out of it, hopefully maganda yung kalabasan ng elections, then I hope that will be a contribution to the literature.
I hope so. And sana you find love in the field soon.
Loves. Just kidding. Who said should be? No, I'm kidding.
Mahal niya trabaho niya.
Yeah.
Sobra nga eh. So pero sabi ko, it has to be anchored into something very concrete, I guess. So yun. Anyway, get out of Baguio and then...
Speaking of concrete, yes.
Okay.
All right. Salamat. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat, Rich.
Noel, it's really nice joining you.
It's been a long
Fun
time.
talking also to Lelo again, as always, a good friend, partner in crime throughout the years. And hopefully we can meet each other in person. Crime. Yeah, either separately or in person again soon. So God willing. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much.
We'll see you,
Richard.
God bless. Now, Leloy. Thank you, Richard. Lelo, ikaw naman, now going back to the US and now, are you that hopeful about the Philippine situation?
Ayun nga, measured optimism. I always take to heart what Chito said, that it could get worse before it gets better. But in the long run, I think Filipinos have a sense of justice. Napupuno yung Pinoy, right?
Yeah.
And pag napupuno sila, nagbabago yung politika. I think one of the reasons why we're in this interregnum, this weird phase in Philippine politics, is napuno yung Pilipino dun sa 30 years of electoral democracy na nagbabago nga yung mga tao na umuupo sa Malacanang, nagbabago nga yung congressman ko, nagbabago nga yung mayor ko, pero fundamentally walang nangyayari na bago. Kaya puno-puno sila, they want something completely different. And the completely different they want is something similar to maybe what we had in the 60s or in the 70s. But panapanahon din yan. This too shall pass, because I don't think these people can pull off a fundamental change of, let's say, worst case scenario mangyari. Makapasok yung mga diktador, makapasok yung mga corrupt, they govern society again. I don't think they can fundamentally change Philippine society because they're out there for themselves. And the Filipino people will realize this. It might take 10 years, might take 20 years, might take 30 years, but hindi naman tanga ang Philippine electorate. It will catch up with them. And I think what I learned is that the fight is never over, Kung walang moments of darkness, there will never be moments of light. And some people are just lucky, some people are born during times of light. People will live, let's say, 50 years of their 80 years in this earth during a time of light, and some people will live 20 years, but ultimately lagi may liwanag, walang liwanag kung walang dilim.
Salamat, alam mo kanina kasi parang with Richard sharing, parang now we're bombarded with all these series and parang actually scenarios na pwedeng mangyari, no? But it seems like you're more collected at this point, and then parang should we as Filipinos have exit plans, you think, like you? Or I think it depends on what you mean by exit plan. Kasi for me, galing mo lang na meron ka talagang may ganun pa ring hope in the Filipinos now.
Kasi I always say, di ba, what does it mean to be a Filipino? It doesn't mean the color of your skin. Hindi naman kayo manggi ang Pilipino. We all say
Right.
kayo manggi ang Pilipino. Ang dami kong kilalang Pilipino na hindi kayo manggi at tunay na
That's
Pilipino
true.
sila. So it's not race, it's not the color of your skin. Is it citizenship? Well, there are Filipino citizens who don't care about the Philippines. There are Filipinos in the United States with American passports who love the Philippines a lot more. So it's not, is it religion? Well, not all Filipinos are Catholic. So ultimately, what binds us together is a common project. So ako, sinasabi ko, wala akong exit strategy from this common project, regardless of where I am, right? If I'm in the United States, I'm voting. If I'm in the United States, I'm writing and I'm appearing in shows like this, and I'm on Zoom calls talking to my fellow citizens. So lalo na ngayon, of course, in this world where we're so connected, it's hard to the only way to exit the Philippines is if you really want to. And my hope is that people don't decide to exit the Philippines regardless of where they are. This is the Philippines of the heart as opposed to the Philippines as a geographic location.
But what will make you come back here? Like kunyari, well, physically and geographically.
Well, ako naman, I plan to retire here. I plan to spend the rest of most of my professional years left in the United States and then come back here. But the nice thing about being a professor is you have at least 3 months off per year, diba? 1 month during the December holidays and then 2 months off for summer. I actually don't get paid during the 2 months of summer sa US. So I can do whatever I want. And I was supposed to be home for three out of the 12 months last year. But the pandemic really just precluded that. Hopefully this year I spend more time in the Philippines. So I mean, I want to be familiar. I never wanted to get to a point where I'm so unfamiliar with the Philippines and nawawala-wala na ako sa EDSA dahil ang dami ng bagong construction.
That's true. Tapos yun, parang what do you think will your role be in like shaping the next of the elections and then the next, well, parang yun, yung susunod na scenarios dito sa nangyayari na pinaint nga natin, no, parang in determining probably the principles that the next generation will hold. Parang at this point, parang, Leloy, kailangan.
Oh my God. Well, I must say, hindi ako kasing energetic ni Richard. Ang dami niyang oras to do so many things. I mean, ultimately, I'm a full-time teacher. So my vocation
and
is really...
And you have a family. That's it. Wala nang love
pero yung kind of energy that he has to kind of combine research and also come up, magkakaroon siya ng TikTok, for example. He's active on social media. He's on YouTube.
You doing that, but will you ever do that?
I don't think so. For me, my priority now is my students. And alam ko napakaliit nun, but that's also malalim and profound for me.
Cooking.
And I must say my cooking. I must say my students are like 70% Filipino American. And
good.
Now naman the calculus for me is how to invite them. So I say, I'm going to teach a class, history of the Philippines, history and culture of the Philippines. I'm laying out for you the history, but I'm also inviting you to join the story. And I think that for me is my immediate goal, to get those. And magugulat ka, I have students who come back, they volunteer for campaigns, for example. I had one student, Filipino citizen, na I think became part of Sen Kiko's office, and I was very proud, right? So, and then bumalik sa America, and we processed that experience. So I still feel like I'm connected to the Philippines, even if I'm in the United States.
And you'll be writing more, I suppose, huh?
Yeah, I mean, over the summer, last summer actually, I was planning to do a history of the Philippines podcast called How We Got Here, which is from the 19th century until present. I did 4 episodes, so hindi ko natapos. So maybe over the summer, tatapusin ko siya. So it's supposed to be like it's history and civics, and then on top of that, I'm working with our good dear friend, Father Tito, and we're trying to come up with a kind of primer on elections along with Manolo, a civics primer on elections along with Manolo Quezon and Carlos Santiago. So now nothing as extensive as what Richard is doing, but you do what you can. Minsan si Richard bago sa mo nakaka-challenge eh. Kasi ang dami ginagawa. So,
pero totoo nakakapagod din yung ginagawa.
Nakakapagod din, yeah. But we need people like that to challenge us to say, meron pa bang kaya pa bang i-push to? Yeah.
That's true. And lastly, you're talking to the Ateneo audience now. Do you miss Ateneo audience?
I miss Ateneo so much. Sometimes I get students na, they come from the Philippines, high schools sa Philippines, and then they go to the US. And they remind me a lot of Ateneo students. They remind me a lot of LaSalle students. And those are the moments when I miss Ateneo students. Also, of course, miss my colleagues there. Yeah.
Yes.
Bakit ano ba bago sa Ateneo? Ano ba bago sa Ateneo ngayon?
Yun, COVID. Mas mahirap pumasok sa campus ngayon, di ba? Parang in the end, bubuksan mo yung puso ni Leloy at tinisa yan. Di ba? Parang gano'n yung...
That's true. I mean, it is true. Like, you think about it, parang kung mag-prep ka dyan, mag-college ka dyan, like,
That's true.
Most of your life is going to be spent in those halls, right?
Yeah.
I love the place. I hope to retire. I hope to retire as an Ateneo part-time lecturer one day.
Sa tingin ko mangyayari naman yan. Your final message to this university that loves you back and that misses you too, ha? Ikaw lang yung list, no? Hello?
Hindi, marami namang overseas Ateneans dyan.
Totoo naman. But you can always go back. Yun naman yung nangyayari sa Ateneo. Pwede naman tayong bumalik. Yun.
Yeah. You go up into the hill. We always talk about down from the hill, but we never talked about going up into the hill again. What is that process like? Because Ateneo is that kind of place that invites you back, diba? And I was tell actually maraming Atenista dito, maraming alumni dito.
Yeah.
There is a way to go up. You always talk about up, down from there. There's always a way to go up into the hill. And you know what that is? Visit your teachers. O ngayon, Zoom with your teachers.
That's
Lots of your Ateneo professors, me included, we want to actually catch up on you. Yung mga ibang professor dyan, yung mga kind of legend teachers, they've gone through like thousands and thousands of students. But even those people, they get an email from a student and they say, sir, I miss you, ma'am, I miss you, I miss the experience. Can we talk?
Oh my God.
I think they would be open to that. And not enough students do that. It's so easy. Huwag na kayo maghintay na magkaroon ng reunion. Wala mag-reunion ngayon. It's so easy to connect with Ateneo. And just remember, sa Ateneo may pabaon, di ba?
Yeah, yung letters, no?
How many
year?
Diba?
We lost Father Ferriols and I lost Ferbian too. No? So parang gawin nyo yan sa mga teachers nyo, no?
Yeah. How many of you, di ba, may mga teachers kayo, favorite teachers, sinulatan nyo ng pabaon note, right? How many of you have actually caught up with them 5 years after?
Yeah.
Do you just assume na ayaw nila makapag-usap sa'yo? Dati naalala ko, meron akong very passing experience. It's like, my grade 1 teacher sa Ateneo grade school, si Miss Rivera. I thought she didn't remember me, and so pag nakita ko siya sa grade school, hindi ako lumalapit, nahihiya ako. And then one day I just said, I just approached her and said, Ms. Rivera, is your grade 1 pupil there? And she's like, yeah, I remember you. I thought you'd forgotten me. And so a lot of these Ateneans here, reconnect with Ateneo, you never, and we had the most wonderful conversation, by the way. It's so easy to connect with Ateneo because yung idea of Pura Personalis is really an idea also of lifelong learning. These people can be, teachers and friends for life if you want them to.
That's true. Like, who do you miss here? Well, ako, si Pagsi, I've been like thinking of like visiting him because of the Oh my
I
God.
have always, I've always, in terms of Jesuits, I've always, Father Louis David, I owe you, I owe you an email, I owe you a call. Yeah, I owe you an email, I owe you a call. Yeah. So marami naman, but
and now that he's not president, now that he's not president, parang ang sarap kausap ni Jet siguro, no? About
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, who do you want to? Ikaw, Noel, who do you want to send a note to? Like,
ako si Jeff kasi I just like listened to his comedy last Sunday and sabi, oo nga, sana parang nakakamiss yung energy niya. Yung tipong gano'n dito sa nangyayari ngayon. But otherwise, you are hopeful. We're hopeful that things will turn out really well. Pero sabi mo nga, yung pagdadaanan, maraming pagdadaanan pa bago mangyari. So, yun. We miss you, Leloy. Well, if this had to happen at this point, really, but ibang klase lang talaga because at this point, hindi pwedeng hindi kumilos, hindi pwedeng hindi gumawa ng posisyon. Pero ang hirap lang mag-organize nang hindi tayo nagkikita. Di mo gano'n? Parang feeling ko nung mga panahon natin, sanay tayo pumunta sa kalye dahil nagkikita tayo sa campus.
Kahit gate 2.5, kahit gate 2.5 lang yung mga busina campaigns dati, di ba? Hindi na nangyayari.
That's true. So, ano yung sphere for organization na ngayon na nakikita mo? Really, social media, no? Na ibang-iba pa rin. Pero hindi lahat may access eh.
To social media?
Social media, oo yun eh. Parang,
ako local politics pa rin dahil yun yung mas sustainable avenue for growth.
That's true.
Right? Kasi, like right now, for example, we keep thinking about national politics and madedepress tayo. But you know who the governor of Dinagat is? Diba? It's Kakabag-ao, diba? You know that Kaka took out a big Ecleo dynasty and until now, binoboto pa rin nila si Kaka dahil pinakita ni Kaka that an alternative is possible and not only possible but good for the people. So, can we have more Kakabag-aos na ground up talaga? And one day, just keep contesting these local governments and make sure na may alternative candidate dito, may alternative candidate doon. The next thing gigising ka, doesn't matter kahit gaano kasama yung tao sa Malacanang, ang gagaling ng mga mayor mo uunlad yung Pilipinas. Diba? I mean, yun yung naisip ko eh.
Kaya gusto natin bumili ng lupa sa Kaya gusto natin bumili ng lupa sa Marikina kasi magaling yung mayor nila, or sa Pasig.
Pasig, di ba?
Yeah, so in the end,
speaking of Ateneo, di ba? Galing ako sa Pol-Sci department. Alam mo naman kami sa Pol-Sci. From the professors to si Ate Sally, our secretary, mahal namin si Vico Soto, di ba? Because he was proud graduate of the Pol-Sci department. Yeah.
And in the end, tama ka na, it's local governance. It's really local governance. And in the end, parang you're being attuned to the ground. Yung tipong, in the end, hindi ka palalaman dun sa sistema. Kahit gaano kahirap. But,
so sana mas maraming Atenista na tumakbo ng local. At least kami, for example, yung batch namin, yung Sanggo president namin, yung Sanggo president ng batch namin, si Luis Abad, pwede na maging congressman this year, tumatakbo siya at sana naman palayin at manalo, di ba? So that's actually a model for Ateneo leadership. Lahat ng mga, you wanna kind of spread the kind of model of education and the principles you learn from Ateneo. Don't aim for Malacanang immediately. Like, tumakbo yung konsehal, for example, di ba? Ang dami at least na pwedeng tumakbo for councilor right?
And be a good
captain nga lang. Kahit barangay captain nga lang. Daming, that's civics, right? That's a way of becoming a citizen.
Kasi dati parang ayaw maglaro ng politika yung mga Atenista, di ba? Kailangan mo influensya ka sa labas. But now, parang nakita mo na there's a way to affect change by really getting into politics. At sana yun, we have dual, and we have that excellence also to get there.
How about your batchmates? Meron ka ba mga batchmates na in local politics na top of your mind?
No, but more career officers. Like kunyari,
ayun din.
Hans Kakdak of OWA is there. He's been there. Kahit sino yung administration na nandun pa rin siya. So ako parang yun, maging magaling kahit nasaan. Yun parang ikaw yan. Parang kahit wala ka dito, yun, parang ginagawa mo pa rin yung pwede mong gawa pagtulong. So tama ko na, in the end, pipitin mo ng puso mo at Atenista ka pa rin. So,
yes, of course.
Thank you, Lelo. Yan sana.
Thank you, Noel.
Back to the US tomorrow and we'll see you again. Maraming salamat po. And we'll do this again, Leloy, when you come back. When will you be here?
Hopefully in June.
In June. Okay, by that time we have a new president. So let's see how things will change. Maraming salamat, Leloy.
Maraming salamat din.
Thank you. Huwag ka muna umalis.
Okay.
Mga katipuneros, it's time to level up! Your talk variety program showcasing the best in media and other fields. As we feature the most loved personalities and the best practices of what we truly refer to as Magis. Together with multi-awarded multimedia guru Mr. Noel Ferrer, let's all level up every Fridays from 3 to 6 p.m. here on radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM. Radyo-katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.